Okay, so this is part two of the general theory video on the production pipeline, or how a 3D animated movie gets made. And we've looked at development and pre-production, and now we are finally in production. And there is a bit of a blur between pre-production and production. Some of the things that we talked about, such as modeling and rigging and doing animation testing, in a way, these are really part of production. But because there's no firm dividing line between pre-production and production, as there is in live action, obviously, which is to say, day one of principal photography, that's when a live action film begins. We don't really have that firm demarcation in animation, so there is a little bit of a blur between pre-production and production. But nonetheless, there is a meaningful distinction. Production is when you really say, okay, fine, we like the script, or we love the script, hopefully, we love the animatic, we're now going full speed ahead, we're hiring people, we're going to crew up to 100 people or whatever it's going to take to make our movie. So back to editorial. Now, editorial is the hub of the production. It's really where movies get made. And any director quickly discovers that his or her most important partner on the movie, apart from obviously the producer who got you this far, is the editor. A good editor can make or break a movie, and the editor is going to assemble all the sequences together and start breaking them out to layout, which is going to be the next department. And this goes in rough layout. Really, you have rough layout and final layout. But in the beginning, layout will basically take all of the storyboards and they'll start. This is a 2D layout from a 2D animated film, but obviously 3D layout will be basically rough blocking. Pre-visualization is quite similar to what layout does. You're basically deciding where's the camera is going to go, where the character is going to be staged, and what's the shot continuity going to look like. Incredibly important job. You really need a good head of layout. And the layout artist will really figure out how every shot is going to work, how the cameras will move. They're going to figure out the sequence in great detail and then hand that over to the animation department. Meanwhile, your art department are doing color keys. Remember, we did a color script for the whole movie, how the whole movie changes and the color and the lighting and the style over the course of the whole film. Now, you have to do the same thing sequence by sequence. So color keys for sequence are very important. This is this is done by some of the excellent students at the animation workshop. This is a really lovely student film called The Backwater Gospel, where they did really beautiful color keys. Well worth taking a look at that film on YouTube. It's an excellent piece of work. Really incredibly beautiful work. So now the completed shots in layout go to animation. This is me at my desk on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, about 12 years old. And the animator might be expected on a high-end feature at, say, Pixar or DreamWorks to do maybe 5 seconds a week. But if you're working on a much lower budget production, you might have to do 30 seconds a week. Certainly TV would demand between 25 and 30 seconds a week. Very tough. So animators can be, it really depends on the quality that the production can afford. Now, then the animators will show their work to the director. This is a picture of Steven Spielberg. He's actually, I've never worked for Mr. Spielberg. I've never been lucky enough to send my work to him. But the director, whoever it is, will hopefully, in a perfect world, brief the animator, though that is relatively uncommon because directors are so busy. But they're certainly going to give notes on the shots. Or it's possible, if the director doesn't want to get involved in the animation, that there might be an animation director who does this job. That's also possible. And the bigger the budget, the more notes you're going to get. The lower the budget, the more shots will just have to go through day by day. Lighting. Once the animators finish with their shot, they're probably going to publish a cache of shot data to the lighting department. That means publishing a cache of the geometry, not all the animation curves, but the surface topography, so that lighting can start to light the shot. And they will be figuring out how the environments are going to work in there, and they'll be looking very closely at the color keys that the art department has generated to make all the shots look pretty. Then you get into character finaling once the animation is approved. This is taken from the movie 9, and once the animation is done, you're then going to have these sort of final tweaks. Sometimes the animators will have to do that. Sometimes that's a different department. Then you go to final layout, where final layout, the final layout department take the finished animation and they make the final tweaks to the camera to make sure that all the shots flow in one sequence in a perfect and seamless way. Then it all goes back to editorial. Editorial cut everything back into the animation reel, and they make sure that everything is playing in continuity in the overall animatic as they assemble the movie. Then you've got the simulation department. This is full of techies with enormous brains who are going to do cloth and hair and tentacles and fur, all of the stuff that used to be incredibly difficult, but now is getting simpler now that Maya has, there are simpler, cheaper plugins for this kind of thing than there used to be. But still, it's an expensive, complex part of the process, and if you want to avoid these heartaches, avoid characters with fur. Effects. Somebody's got to do fire and water and smoke. Water is very difficult. Avoid water at all costs in an animated film. It is a nightmare, incredibly hard to get right. Still very labor intensive, still very expensive, hard to get it working. Finally, we go to compositing. And the digital compositors will put all of the elements together. And essentially, really you're talking about combining images. So in this example, we've got our swimmer rescuing this girl in the bikini, and we've got to mat them into the background. So you need mats of various descriptions, and the compositor is going to put all of these different elements together and produce a final seamless image. So compositing, a very, very important department. Then you've got paint effects. You're talking here about last-minute 2D fixes or dust busting, and basically dust busting is just literally from the old days when you just had dust on a screen, and that just in little flecks, things that are wrong, odd little digital artifacts. So you're just pouring through the footage, just trying to get rid of any last-minute problems or bugs or ugly bits of digital crap that have somehow made it through to the final renders. Then we've got rendering, and this is where we really render out the final images of the shot. This can take a long time. This is where you need a really big render farm to render out images, and lots of productions get stuck at this point. Typically, it's done overnight, and you usually have render wranglers who. It sounds like a glamorous job. It isn't. It involves sitting up all night to make sure that there are no glitches in the render, to re-render frames that get dropped by the servers for some reason. And the render wranglers can be your friend, because if you need a shot rendered overnight to show to the director, you can actually get the render wranglers to prioritize your shot and help fix stuff. So make sure you learn the render wranglers' names and buy them drinks in the pub, because they can save your bacon if they want to, or not if they don't. So finally, we print to film. Digital files get printed to film. Or do they? Increasingly, the film is actually not an important part of the process, and we still talk about making films, but actually the switch to digital filmmaking is almost complete now, as I record this. Film is still important. You will still, as a filmmaker, you will still need to make prints of your film, but far fewer than you used to. Finally, you've got post-production. Post-production is really when you're done with your making your movie. You're now adding all the bits and pieces. So you've got Foley, and this is actually named after a guy, I think at the Warner Brothers lot back in the 40s, who actually he was called Foley, and he was the guy you went to for all the sound effects. Foley artists tend to have rooms full of knickknacks, trombones and gongs and wooden blocks and stuff to make sound effects for movies. And that's what they do. That's what they do every day. And they will do your final sound effects. Then there's the music. And of course, you can only compose your score once the edit is completely locked. Up until now, you've been working with scratch music, taken from other movies, which you don't have the rights to. So you've got to pay your composer to do music that is similar to that. You'll already have music in your reel. The composer will hear the music you put in your reel, which you've put in there for their reference, but they will do the final score, and you hope that you get a really nice composition. Then you've got your final mix. Now you're going to adjust all of your sound levels to perfection. The final mix is really about making sure that all the levels are good. So, you can hear the characters talking, but you've got the music at just the right level, and you can hear the sound effects, but different parts don't drown out other parts. Then you've got color timing, also known as color balancing. And this is where you adjust the color through the film shot by shot. And what you're trying to make sure is that within each sequence that the colors are consistent, so you don't suddenly have everything going yellow or blue or red. That the overall color balance is consistent shot for shot. And this is quite a time-consuming process. Literally every shot in the film balancing all those colors. Then finally you're done. Now you've got opening night, hopefully you've got publicity for your movie, you've got a P&A budget, as they call it, for prints and advertising, and you can publicize your film and people get excited. You're going to try and sell it. The actors hopefully will go on shows. Here's David Letterman, perhaps interviewing an actor or an actress to talk about the film and hopefully publicize your film so that you can generate buzz and excitement and get people into the movie theaters where hopefully the public will buy lots and lots of tickets. You hope. At least that's the general idea. There's also all your ancillary sales, as they're called, your DVDs, your pay-per-view, your licensing, your games, your TV rights, your cable, and this can be as much as your box office was in the first place. So if your box office is 100 million, let's hope, we always be optimistic, your ancillary sales might be something pretty similar. Although DVD sales have been dropping off a lot recently. Then finally, hopefully, you will get rich. And as the cliche goes, you retire to the south of France. Here's the pipeline on one page. Probably can't see it terribly clearly, but this is a rough schematic of how to get a movie made. And here's a nice thing from Canal Plus saying, I want to make an animated movie. I think you can download it on their website, so be sure to check that out. And it'll tell you exactly what all the steps are in one handy page. So that's it. That's a general introduction to the business of making animated films. It took me a long time to figure this out, so I hope it doesn't seem too obvious or trite to you. It is a long and complex process, and it is a miracle. Once you've gone through it, you have enormous respect for anyone who tries to do it themselves, because it is a difficult thing, but well worth the achievement.